I'm Beth O'Donnell, the local rep from Sadlier. So I asked everyone if you could bring a student text and a teacher guide, and the reason why is the pages in the teacher guide are reduced. So it's a little hard to look at the detail on that page. Just so that you would be able to look at, we're going to go through the student text first and then quickly skim through the teacher's guide. So I asked everyone to bring a student text for that reason so that we could look together. The program is Common Core Progress. You have all of these components, the student text, the teacher guide, the testing booklet, and then the online components. So one thing I just want to point out is it's a single login, okay, and then it's a one-touch for parents and students. And this is where you'll find all of those free resources, and I'll show you what those look like, and we'll go over those, okay? That's been one of the big questions. Is there a site for parents and students? And the answer is yes. Within your teacher's site, you'll be able to see all of those components, student, teacher, and parent, but we lock the teacher because there is assessment built in there so that it's closely held for you so that parents wouldn't be able to get that. Okay, so I know that you guys are in your first year of Common Core implementation. Does anybody here feel like, all right, I totally understand all of this? Like I've mastered. Okay, good. Me neither. Me neither. And after, even though it was a really short summer break because of all our snowstorms last year, I needed a refresher myself. So I just kind of wanted to quickly, talk about this. So the Common Core standards kind of encompass 3 entities. So the first, you'll see in the red, is the Common Core Learning Standards. And these are just your content standards. You know them, you're totally comfortable with them. It's what you're teaching in your particular grade level. But then the other 2 things are the standards for mathematical practice and the 3 shifts, okay? So these 3 things we need to be addressing every day. So I gave everybody a handout. So on the side I'm hoping that you can look at right now is you'll see this yellow section. So the alignment to the standards for mathematical practice. And then Rachel also put this up online for you, so if you lose this, that it's available. And I have additional copies too. Okay, so the standards for mathematical practice, these are the process standards or the thinking standards. So it's what your students should be thinking about when they're learning math. So there are 8 of these standards, okay? But you'll notice on this sheet that we've kind of collapsed them into 4 categories. So just to go over those standards, numbers 1 and 6, that's the first box that you see there. Those really are they are the most important standards for mathematical practice. And this relates to problem solving, and that problem solving should permeate every day of instruction. And you'll see that in the book. Okay, the next 2 have to do with reasoning and explaining, that students should be able to reason and explain. The third category talks about modeling with tools and using tools strategically. So moving beyond the concrete, okay? Not just using a concrete manipulative. And then the last is seeing the structure in math. So for example, something like place value, okay? So I just wanted to go over those really quickly because I'm going to point out in the book when we're doing these types of activities, we're meeting these mathematical practices. Okay, on the flip side are the shifts, okay? So the shifts is what should be happening during instruction. So there are 3 shifts: focus, coherence, and rigor. When we talk about focus, this is where the U.S. curriculum was highly criticized, especially in math, for being a mile wide and an inch deep, okay? So what we've done, what the Common Core State Standards have done, is taken less topics per grade level and going into more depth, okay? The second is coherence. So students tended to think of math as a series of isolated events. They didn't see how addition was connected to multiplication. So we're looking at what is the coherence, what is the connection within my grade level, and what is the connection across the grade level, okay? And then the third is rigor, and rigor has 2 parts. So the first part of rigor is conceptual understanding, and the second part is fluency. So we're going to be talking about the shifts and talking about the standards for mathematical practice and pointing that out within the book. So I just kind of wanted to do a quick overview. So one of the things that's also very different about the Common Core classroom is that we are asking students to visualize, we're asking them to collaborate, we're asking them to explain and justify. We're asking them to do those 4 things. So when you think of when you were in the math classroom, say when you were learning multiplication tables, what was that experience like? What did you do? If you're thinking back to your math classroom.
Memorization.
Straight rote memorization, right? Practice, I heard someone else say. Worksheets, okay? So this is a big shift because this is the way that we learned math, but now what we're asking to do is for students to talk about math, to have peer collaboration every day, to have students share their ideas, share their strategies, show multiple models, multiple representations. So this is a big change for us, it's, just in the way that this is being done, especially if we've never seen that modeled ourselves, okay? One of the other things that comes up over and over again in our workshops is the difference between explanation and justify, okay? And you'll see this in the word problems, that students are asked to both explain and justify. So what's the difference? So explanation is related to the procedure. What did you do to arrive at this answer, okay? But justify talks about the why. So why does this work mathematically? So if we're looking at a problem like 3 times 5, if we're going to justify the answer, students would say that it's 3 times 5 because multiplication is the number of groups times the number in each group. So if I have 3 groups of 5, the answer is 15. So justification connects the number with the operation, okay? And that's what we're asking students to do when they collaborate. We're asking them to use their math vocabulary, communicate mathematically, share your ideas, share your strategies. How did you arrive at the solution? Because there's multiple ways to arrive at that solution, okay? All right, so that's just kind of a really, really quick overview of Common Core. All right, so let's take a closer look at the student book. So the first thing that you're going to see when you open up your book within the table of contents is that all of the Common Core state standards are identified in a running bar. And when you see a standard being addressed over and over again, that's the specific content, that's the specific standards that are the focus of your grade level. So you'll have multiple lessons on those particular standards. Okay, so you'll see I just circled that here for you. The next thing that you're going to see is how we're addressing focus. So each of these units is the focus of your core grade level content. So we're going to focus on number and operations. We're going to focus on measurement and data. Okay? So it kind of just gives you a cheat sheet of the focus of your particular grade level. After every individual unit, you'll have 2 forms of assessment that are available to you. The first is a Common Core review, and the second is a performance task. So this is how they're different. The Common Core review is built right into your book. It only assesses 1 Common Core state standard at a time. The performance tasks are found online only in your teacher center. So it's a closely held assessment. And the performance tasks assess a cluster of standards at one time. Okay, so that's how those are different. Also, at the very back of your table of contents, you'll see in this blue box a foundational skills handbook. So remember how we talked about the focus, that we're addressing less topics in more depth. Well, one of the things that's happening as we're making this transition over to Common Core is that content that may previously have been in 4th grade has now been moved to 3rd grade or moved to 5th grade. So there are going to be natural gaps in instruction as we make this transition over, especially in year 1 of your implementation. So if you're teaching 4th grade, there are going to be 3rd grade, there are going to be skills that they traditionally would have learned in 4th grade that are now moved to 3rd grade. So you will have to dip into this foundational skills handbook to fill in those gaps in instruction. So we put that there so that you're not having to go to an outside resource, find additional lessons, find additional practice, that everything is built into your book, okay? There are mini lessons that focus on the prerequisite skill, and then online, there's a section for this foundational skills handbook where there's additional practice. So again, you don't have to create your own. You're not going onto a teacher-created website where you have to buy content that another teacher has created. Everything is built in there for you in order to address those prerequisite skills. Okay. The next thing is that your school district has provided you with a correlation to everyday math. They've provided you with a pacing schedule, a scope and sequence, and an assessment schedule. This is amazing. I have visited a lot of school districts in the last year. No other district has done this. So they've basically been given the book and said, hey, good luck filling in the gaps in your basal program and get started. So this is really nice because everything is planned out for you. And again, throughout the book, I'm just going to be pointing out where we're addressing the standards for mathematical practice and where we're addressing the shift. So that's going to come up throughout. Okay, so let's open up to any new unit within the student book. It doesn't matter what unit you're going to, but let's just look at the start of any unit. So the first thing that you're going to see is the progress check. And what this does is this addresses the coherence, okay? So what it's doing is it's showing the students, okay, this is what we're going to be doing in this lesson. Can I do this? Some students may be able to, some may not within their particular grade level, but it's showing them in 3rd grade, this is the related content. This is what you've already learned that's related to this. Can you do this? And the question that comes up all the time, when am I ever going to use this again? It's showing them in the grade level above, this is where you're going to revisit this again. So it's showing them the coherence within the lesson. So this is a nice self-assessment for students just to see how do you think you're doing. But this isn't something to thumb your nose at because this is your first chance to look at, do my students have the prerequisite skills to move into this unit? How do I need to differentiate which students do not understand that what we're going to be addressing, okay? So it's a great first look at your students and what you're going to be doing. On the back of that page, and the pages are perforated, is a home connect. So if you are consuming this and if you're sending these pages home, especially for a student that might be struggling, the parent can see the student self-assessment and then a variety of activities that they can do to help boost that student. Now also online, you'll have it in your teacher center and it's in the student and family center, are additional activities related for each unit in your book, but they're different than these activities because they relate the content of the lesson in a real-world connection, but connected to their lives. So here's a discussion you can have while grocery shopping with your child. Here's a discussion you can have when driving home from sports, connected to the Common Core, but talking about we're on our drive home from sports or we're on our drive home from school. So that might be something that might be nice to show to parents on back to school night. That's a quick option within that family center, or it's something that you could send home for additional help if you wanted to. We always begin a unit with an engaging picture that we relate to the content because again, Common Core is telling us that we must relate this to real world and to their experience and to their lives. So it puts the content of the unit into a real world setting. And then we begin with an essential question. So this essential question at the beginning of the unit is the big idea. This frames the focus for the unit, okay? Now, one of the struggles for Common Core is that you have to make it relatable. You have to make it connect to real world. But you don't have any control over that content. So you have to talk about this on a 4th grade level. You have to relate it to the real world. And it has to talk about numbers and operations. That's pretty difficult to do. So within your teacher guide, there are teaching points on how to discuss this picture, but then also conversation starters and background knowledge for you about that essential question, how to get your students collaborating, okay, within the classroom. The book follows the gradual release of responsibility model, which I know you're using in the district already, but I always just like to point out it's guided instruction, guided practice, and independent practice, and your pages are banded. So guided instruction is always banded in green. And if you look at any of the student pages that you have your book open to right now, you'll see that. Guided practice is orange and independent practice is purple. So it's just keying you to that gradual release model. And then peer collaboration is woven throughout the book, okay, in all of these exercises. When we begin the focus, so the content of an individual lesson, we also have an essential question. And that's related, that's the narrowed focus of that particular lesson. So all of these little essential questions, EQs, help frame the big idea that we saw on that unit opener. So it's tiny little pieces that they build together so that they can revisit that essential question at the beginning of the overall unit. We identify what the Common Core state standard is, and then we identify their words for them in a teaching box. So this is their math vocabulary that they need to know. And then you'll notice that the words are also highlighted in context on the page. So one of the biggest things about MP6, Attend to Precision, is that they must be able to communicate mathematically. They must use the correct vocabulary. So this is something that's really difficult. So if you're not constantly exposing them to that vocabulary and using that vocabulary, it's really hard for students to retain that. But Common Core demands, this really is that huge overall focus, is communicating mathematically and using the correct vocabulary. When we go into our guided instruction, what we do is we take our lessons and we break them into a series of understand models. So there may be 2 or 3 understand models. So it's a 2-step lesson process. The first is understand, where we break down the content, and then connect, where we bring it together. So one of the things that Common Core is telling us is that we cannot rely on a basal math program anymore, because a basal math program is giving us one model, one way to approach a program. And for most elementary school teachers, their focus is English language arts. I mean, did anybody say, I want to be an elementary school math teacher? Not really, right? So if that's not your background, and your basal is only showing you one way to show a problem to students, that's not necessarily your background where you would be able to come up with multiple models, multiple ways to approach a problem. So that's what we're doing, is we're breaking it down into manageable, bite-sized pieces and showing students multiple models, multiple tools, multiple strategies. Now, some of your students may not need this broken down for them. Sometimes you might be able to just move right to the connect, okay? But if you do need it, if you do need multiple representations, they're available in those understand models. When we connect the lesson, this is bringing the lesson together for the students, okay? At the bottom of that connect page, you're always going to see this pencil icon. And that's where we're asking students to explain and justify the answer, okay? So one of the difficult things too is that you are tasked with looking at your 25 third graders that you're working with and understanding their thinking. That's really difficult to do. Using this explain activity by asking students to explain and justify, it gives you some insight into their thinking process. And are they building that deep conceptual understanding? Are they getting that rigor? And if not, maybe we need to step back and reteach, okay? The other thing about this connect page is that the connect page always begins with a real world math problem, and it always uses a tool. Okay, so we're meeting MP 1, 4, and 5 with that real-world math problem. So you're going to see problem solving every day. Every day. It has to permeate instruction. And then the last thing I just want to point out to you is this remember box. Has everybody kind of seen one of these remember boxes? So what this is, I like to think of this as a post-it note on the page. So it's just kind of keying our students. Hey, remember this? This is important. Maybe we learned this in the last unit and we need this skill again. Or maybe this is something that we learned in a prior grade level that we're activating. Because in English language arts, students have that quick recall, but because in math they tend to think of it as a series of isolated events, they don't necessarily have that connection. Okay, so it's just kind of reawakening that, just keying them. Hey, don't forget about this to help them with these problems. When we look at our guided practice, this is the we do it together, we're releasing responsibility. These exercises are scaffolded, so they move from easy to most difficult, okay? And then we always end this guided practice with a think, pair, share, and this is that collaboration. So first we want students to think and work on this problem independently, and then we would pair students in groups of 2 or groups of 3 to discuss the problem. So we do this because this is part of that peer collaboration. This is part of using our math vocabulary. This is part of explain and justify. We also know that students, particularly in math, tend to make the same errors, and they learn better through peer collaboration and from each other. It also helps students to see, oh, there are multiple ways. The way that I came to the solution is different than maybe this person. Maybe someone used a number line. My peer drew a picture. Someone else used a graph. Someone else used their words, okay? So it shows them those multiple ways. You should pair your students strategically when doing a think, pair, share. You can't just evens, odds, get together, okay? You should pair students strategically, and in particular, a struggling student with a higher level student. It makes both students work to communicate and also to show those different models, okay? When we look at the rigor, remember rigor is two parts. It's conceptual understanding and then fluency, okay? So when we address independent practice, this is where we address rigor. So there's abundant practice, the exercises are scaffolded, and they're cognitively demanding. So these exercises, you couldn't just say this table is going to do 1 to 5, this table is going to do 5 to 10, and this table is going to do 10 to 15. Because they would be getting the easiest problems and they would be getting the most difficult, okay? We do this to address that rigor so that we want more cognitively demanding, more in-depth, more critical thinking activities, but we also do that to build the fluency in students, okay? So the way that I think of this independent practice page is thinking of playing Jeopardy. So does anybody play Jeopardy every night? No. Okay. I love it. My husband and I, before we had kids, we used to play every night. It was really competitive. And if you've ever watched a game when a contestant hunts and pecks for the daily double, so maybe they're choosing a $200 question from this category and an $800 question from this category, and it's really difficult to quickly arrive at that answer, versus a player who methodically goes down a category. So they're starting with the easiest question, they're starting with the 200, they're moving to 400. So if you've ever played, you'll notice that once you're within that category, you can more quickly arrive at that answer. And I like to think of these activities like that. So we're starting with the easiest to kind of build some confidence, okay? But also to give that fluency practice, and then we're moving into more depth, and we're correlating that to the depth of knowledge, to Webb's depth of knowledge, those activities, okay? We end a unit with the assessment. So remember that Common Core review reviews one Common Core standard at a time versus the performance task, which reviews a cluster. The performance tasks for each unit are only found online in your teacher center. They're protected. However, built into your book is a mid-year and an end-of-year, and that's built into the book, okay? So I know that the national assessments have been pushed back, and then some states are developing their own. But these performance tests were kind of the big fear of Common Core, because this is what the national standards are supposed to look like. So a couple of years ago, we had people just saying, we need performance tests, we need to be doing it every day. So they're very cognitively demanding. They're assessing multiple cluster of standards at a time. But the other thing about performance tasks is they're very long, okay? And you may not have that instructional time or that class time to do that. So even though the assessments have been delayed, we always suggest maybe just do one of these questions as a whole group activity. Maybe on a day when you have a shortened schedule because you have assembly, so maybe you only have 20 minutes. Or you could break up some of these questions. That group 1 will do question number 1, group 2 will do question number 2, and then you'll have one person who's nominated to both explain and justify how you arrived at this answer. So is it something you have to do? No, but this is the way that I've seen some teachers using those performance tasks so that they're still at least addressing them and giving students a little bit of practice.
Can I ask a quick pacing question? How big a block do you see for math? Is it each lesson supposed to be an hour? Are they designed to be an hour? Are they designed to be more? Like some of the lessons have like 40 independent practice questions. Like, is the expectation they get done all this in one lesson? Okay,
so here's one of the things. Two things. First, the district has put together a pacing schedule for you so that you are addressing the gaps in your basal, you're addressing all the Common Core state standards, before our April assessments. However, this is something I was going to talk about with the teacher's guide, built into the teacher guide and the student book. One of the things that we're known for as a company, we're a smaller company, is providing abundant practice for students and abundant resources for teachers. Because budgets are very tight, materials are very expensive, and most of the time when a district is purchasing something, they're going to be using it for a number of years. So you know, if you teach third grade for 3 years in a row, each class is different. Each class has their own needs. So as a company, we like to make sure that there's enough built in. So number one, it doesn't get stale for you after year 2. And so that you can address those different needs of your students. Do you need to do every exercise in the book? Absolutely not. Your pacing wouldn't even allow that in order to have us be adequately prepared for April for PSSAs.
Right. But when it was designed, this wasn't designed for maybe like an hour block with each lesson.
It's designed as a supplemental, so it isn't a basal.
Okay.
So it was designed that depending on the flexibility of the school,
Okay.
that we always want to provide more. And that you would choose what you're going to work on. Yeah. Okay. In the back of the book, so this is one thing I'm just asking if everyone could open up to the very back of your student text. It's built into your teacher guide, but in the teacher guide it's reduced so it's a lot smaller. You'll see this page that I'm projecting. And this is the problem-solving model. So problem-solving really is the heart of mathematics, and it is definitely the heart of Common Core. So if you don't have a model for problem-solving that is consistent for students, this is the model that we suggest. So it's a 4-step model: read, plan, solve, check. Okay? And this is the POLYA model, P-O-L-Y-A, POLYA. This is what we follow. One of the most difficult things for, as adults, we instinctively, when we encounter a problem, know how we're going to break it apart. But for students, when they're encountering word problems, if they don't have a strategy in place where they attack a word problem the same way every time, it can be very difficult. So this creates a habit of mind. So if you begin doing this in 3rd grade, okay, you'll see that move up so that when our students are in 4th and 5th grade, they just automatically know, I'm reading a problem, this is how I break it apart. I read, plan, solve, check. Okay? Something that I've seen teachers do with this particular page in the book, I've seen them tear it out and laminate it, particularly for the 3rd grade students, so that every time they come across a word problem, they pull out their problem-solving placemat and they put it on the desk. Some teachers I've seen scan this in and make it into a big classroom poster, and some teachers just write the 4 steps up on a bulletin board or on a whiteboard. Okay? So this is the model or strategy that we recommend for students when addressing problem solving. Okay, now we're going to go through the teacher's guide, and again, I'm going to show you lots and lots of resources. Do you have to use all these resources? No, but they're in there for you if it's something that you do want to use. So if you can just take out your teacher's guide. So there's strategies at point of use, there's lesson planners, which you already have all of your lesson plans done, progression charts, or suggested pacing, all of this is done for you again already. And then there's embedded professional development, because whether you're a veteran teacher or you're a new teacher, Common Core is new to everyone. Okay, so there's a lot of information here. So remember that essential question and then the picture. So this is talking about how we can draw on students' personal experience. So there's conversation starters built in for you for this piece in the book. And then you'll notice this yellow activity under the picture. The one thing I want to point out about how this activity is different from all others that are built into each unit is that this activity addresses a prerequisite skill. So remember that student self-check, the progress check. So if you're finding a lot of your students have a gap, which in year 1 of implementation there will be gaps, this is a prerequisite activity built right in before you begin the lesson that you could do with your students. This is the lesson planner, which you won't need, but I just like to point it out because if you needed to quickly write your objective, if you need to know what page you're working on, if you need to fill out a lesson plan, it's just a great quick resource for you. And then always on this page with the lesson planner, you're going to see a reference to Sadlier Connect, to your digital resources. where you log in online to get to these digital resources. Okay. On the back of that page, you'll find a learning progressions chart. So remember that progress check. Maybe a lot of your students are missing the prior grade level skills. This goes into more depth and talks about what the prior grade level was addressing. So if my students are not doing well, maybe I need to go back and revisit place value. Maybe I just need to quickly talk about that to awaken that prior knowledge. Okay? And that's how we're showing the coherence across the grade levels. In regards to actually teaching the lesson, okay, you'll see this yellow box. And what this is doing is it's talking about what your Common Core focus is. It's talking about your objective. It gives you some speaking points on that essential question. And then it refers you to fluency practice. So two things that I want to talk about. The first is the objective. So some teachers like to write the objective up on a board every day. And do any of you follow the SWOBOT method in your school? Okay, so this is something that you can watch literally a 90-second video on the teaching channel. The video is great. So a lot of teachers just write SWOBOT, S-W-A-B-A-T. Students will be able to, and then they talk about that objective. Because if students know and understand what the objective is that they're going to learn that day, they're more apt to retain, okay? So when we talk about, we'll go through our essential question, and then we'll refer them to additional fluency practice if you need it, that'll be found online. But remember, fluency is a part of rigor, but what comes before fluency? Conceptual understanding. So this is where we have really specific teaching points, background knowledge, things having to do with a lesson to help with that conceptual understanding and the conceptual development of your students. Okay, now these are the extras that are kind of, if you look in any page of your teacher's guide, below the reduced student pages, you'll see a series of boxes. So we have support for English language learners, how to differentiate instruction. We have the cross-curricular connection of math to other subjects. So if you do have to collaborate with your peers in other subject areas, that this is something you could do together. And then we're addressing the strands of ELA as related to the Common Core State Standards. So we're doing that through reading opportunities. So it's reading, writing, speaking, and listening in language. And that substandard under language is vocabulary acquisition and use. Okay? So when we're talking about reading, here we're going to talk about those words to know. So giving some examples from modeling that vocabulary to students. Talking about reading and math. Talking about our word problems. How to discuss them with students. You'll see multiple writing opportunities in math as connected to ELA. So write a narrative text as connected to math. Write an informational text as connected to math. And then you'll see speaking opportunities. So talking about that collaboration, talking about getting students speaking in class, how to use the essential question, how to use that think, pair, share activity. So how to do that with your students. And then finally, we're going to talk about connection. So you'll see a digital connection, but then on almost every page, you're going to see this reference to there's more online at Sadly or Connect. Because some students are just not interested in math without that digital connection. Okay, the last thing I just want to point out to you is that Common Core review. Remember, it's reviewing one standard at a time. This is connected to Webb's depth of knowledge, and I know that you're using this in the district. So one of the things that's nice about this assessment is that if students are getting predominantly questions that are correlated to 1 and 2 correct, but then say they're struggling with questions that are connected to Webb's depth of knowledge that are 3s and 4s, this means that they don't have a deep conceptual understanding. And that maybe this is time where we have to maybe pull back, move away a little bit from the abstract, and do a more concrete lesson. So this is another way, because you're tasked with understanding their thinking. So this is a great way, using that Webb's depth of knowledge chart, to get an understanding of your students' thinking. Okay. This is what Sadly or Connect looks like. So this is the one-click access into the student and family resources, this purple box. The first time you register, you need to register using this blue box. Okay? I know there is someone from IST here who's teaching multiple grade levels. Who is that? Okay, great. So what I want to tell you is, if you open up, everyone, if you open up the first page of your teacher's guide, you'll see a series of codes. When you register, you need to have your guide with you, and you'll need the code correlated with Pennsylvania. So just look on this list for Pennsylvania. For the IST teachers, you have to register each book. You have to use the code for each book, so you'll need to have all of your guides. It's actually pretty easy, but it just unlocks that content for you. And then if anyone uses iBooks or Kindle, what you'll see when you log into Sadlier Connect is your books show up on your bookshelf. So you'll see the physical, you'll see your physical book, and you'll click on that. So we're beginning to move all of our online resources over to one platform. In the past, teachers had to log into a series of different websites, but we've consolidated that all, so it's just a one-time, one login. This is just a quick look at what that online material will look at. So I'm sure you know, you open and close this by hitting the plus or minus sign to see all the resources under those areas. The digital resources that are online, the unit performance tasks. Performance tasks 1 and 2, even though they're built into your book, they're also online, okay? Your Home Connect activities, so remember we talked about those extensions. Well, it's an activity, something that we can do while grocery shopping to discuss the content of this lesson. You'll find additional practice activities. You'll find the foundational skills practice activities, fluency practice, and then teacher resources. So you'll find all of that online.
Are the pages available to project from each lesson?
Yes, so what we're doing right now is we're working to have ebooks pushed out to each teacher at the school site so that you can project. You can use the ebook to project your lesson using your smart board.
Okay.
Yeah. You have the benchmark assessments. So one thing I just want to point out to you, in your teacher's guide for those benchmark assessments, there's a scoring rubric, and then there's also student sample responses for the constructed response items. I just want to point that out to you, okay? But you guys have your own assessment schedule as related to this. And that's what the program looks like. So do you have any questions for me?
When do you think those ebooks are going to be available for teachers?
So I just put in the request, so it should be done, I think, within a week. The only thing is, because it's the start of the school year, they're activating, thousands and thousands of digital accounts. So I don't think it should take longer than a week. Yeah. But
Joe Cuso's on vacation this week, so I had to give his email address to Beth when she was putting in the work order. So it's he's not like kind of living it up. He's at a conference, so he's not here. So when he gets back on Monday, I can catch up with him. But I don't know if we'll even hear from Sadlier until next week. So
and the truth is, on our end, that was basically just what we needed, was his name and email address as the contact, so that, because he'll push it out to the school sites. It's really the delay on our end because they're activating, because we have some schools that are on one-to-one that are using other books in that way, and they're pushing all of those out now.
Is that just going to show up when they log into the Connect, Sadlier Connect? Is that where it shows up? Or when you're saying they're pushing it out, where?
So that is what will happen. It'll show up in their Sadlier Connect. So I would urge you to register.
And we'll be able to write.
Well, they're not interactive. So you can write on your smart board and have students fill in the answer,
Right.
but it's not an interactive. It's just an ebook projection.
So it'll be the teacher one or the student one, or both?
It'll be the student book. Yeah, so you'll still need to have your guide with you. For the teachers that are doing registering multiple grade levels, just before everyone leaves, if we can just meet super quick, I'm just going to show you. You don't have to re-register and go back each time into that blue section. You just register once, and then there'll be a drop down at the top for register additional products, and that's where you'll do that. Okay. I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
I just had a question about the student login. So are students, will they have their own
specific to each student login?
No, they just have a one-click where and it's students and families together.
Okay.
Now, within the teacher center, you see all of those resources, but students and families cannot see your material. We keep that protected.
Okay. Are there any like online games or anything like that?
Right now there's not. Yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah.
We have it for all of our other programs, so it's kind of strange they don't have it for this, but I can't imagine it wouldn't be coming in the future.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the one that shows what else is on here? I'm just looking for like the foundational skill practice and some of that stuff, like where it is.
Okay.
So I see the performance tasks. They're,
Scroll down under.
or no, they're right here.
Okay, now scroll down under fair using. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
I see the performance tasks, additional.
Can you just scroll up a little?
The what?
Okay, go to overview.
See the foundational or the teacher resource, we don't know if that's anything different.